You guys, it's been a week. Okay, so last week I think I started my episode, well actually like 2 weeks ago, I started with the episode talking about how pale I am. Surprise, I am still pale. It is 2 degrees outside today. I think it's now up to like 20. And man, there's something about when everyone's sick, when everyone is like exhausted, energy is low, people are trying to get their like excitement for their businesses back, or coming off of the high of like it's the new year, but also it's disgusting out, you don't want to do anything. I just want to be very transparent that this type of year is not my jam. I really like cold, I really like snow, but I do not enjoy the energy. It feels like I'm like climbing a mountain every day. It's like my energy needs to be up, my discipline needs to be up, I need to stay focused. Like there's something about like the ticker in my brain that can be really hard. So in the midst of probably feeling some heaviness or frustration or discouragement or anything else, I kind of got inspired about this topic based on something that happened in my business this week. But I actually want to talk about like conflict and handling client demands, handling client issues, feeling uneasy about things happening in your spaces, in your containers. Maybe you're like struggling with something at work. There's so much like frustration and heaviness when things don't go our way. And I think a lot of the times as women, we expect ourselves to be perfect. Like I remember this silly ass fucking quote, but someone said it and I was like, this is so true. They're like, men are, trained to be brave and women are trained to be perfect. And I've really actually seen that very much play out in every area of my life, as far as like what I was, praised for as a kid, what I was validated for as a kid, what I'm now validated for and praised for as an adult, and just what's expected to me as a female in business. And transparently, I think, if I could be very just blunt with you all, sometimes when I have conversations with people, the way that people talk to me is in this way of like, well, you can't understand because like you make so much money, or you can't understand because you've signed 10 clients this week, or you can't blah, blah. There's this like perception that as you grow in success, that your problems are eliminated. And actually it's completely not that way at all. When you are scaling in life, in business, your revenue, your income, if you're in corporate or whatever, the level of your problems amplify, the stress of your problems amplify, the size of your problems amplify, all those pieces. And I don't think we talk about it enough because for some reason we have in our brains, because of God knows who or what or whatever social media or movie or something that told you that money solves problems. It does not. Now, is money an incredible thing? Absolutely. Does it eliminate some problems? For sure. But it also adds a lot in there. And when you start to build something extraordinary, the blocks and the pieces of what you utilize to build it start to feel heavier. They're heavier to lift. They're heavier to put in place. When you make a mistake, they're more expensive and costly and heavier to move. Like literally picture a fucking brick, right? If it's this big, if it's out of place, you move it, you fix it, you eliminate, not a big deal. But literally if it's this big, it's heavy, it's expensive, it's time consuming. And in my journey of business specifically, I mean in corporate as well, I have experienced bigger and bigger problems as I've scaled. Now, if you come to social media, my personal account, you're probably seeing me hanging out with my niece Nora. You're probably seeing me, wearing mostly expensive bullshit, whatever, my Ralph Lauren coat, a YSL bag. Like, we've seen it in every fucking clip. Like, I'm a rinse and repeat outfit girl, okay? Like, I'm pretty straight and narrow. Like, it's like things are going good, right? I'm a CEO of a couple businesses. I have a podcast. Like, things look good. And then you go to my business page, specifically by the Blazer, you're seeing an 100K month. You're seeing 42K of DM sales in a week. You're seeing like all these big things. And I think when people see that, it's like, okay, things are going good, check, right? It's like we go to another page and it looks like everything's a mess. Bad, check. And we put people in these 2 categories. And just like everything else in life, there is no everything's good, hunky-dory, things are perfect, and everything's bad. There's usually somewhere in between. Now, I think what people associate as sales makes you far to the right or far to the left, like on where you fall on the scale. But I'm going to be very transparent with you that there are people out there making a lot of money that are also losing a lot of money. Now, some of that's based on poor business decisions, like running ads when you don't necessarily need them. I'm not an ads girl, as you guys know. I'm very much organic marketing. So I see people who are building businesses who are like, oh yeah, we did 100K in sales this week and they spent $90,000 on ads. Like, I don't see that as a good business, in my opinion. I don't care that you made 100K, you technically made 10, like whatever, which is amazing. You made 10K in a week, but don't pitch it as you made $100,000 this week. That's not what actually happened. Or I see people who are, so that's like a bad business decision, right? There's other people who are just bad at actually executing and being what they say they are, which is lying, right? It's not authentic, it's fake, it's disappointing clients, it's letting people get excited and coming through the door and then immediately feeling disappointment. I see that a lot with some people online. I know of specific people who have very clearly talked about, massive wins, clients paying $30,000 in full, all this crazy stuff, and they literally have lost multiple Stripe accounts because they have so many chargebacks, or they have so many disputes, or whatever else. So I want to just remind you guys that like the bigger necessarily isn't always the better. Sometimes it's self-inflicted, sometimes it's not. Now, I want to talk about more on the non-self-inflicted piece today, because here's the thing. If you're a good person and you can learn how to make good business decisions, the self-inflicted issues are going to diminish. Now, there's a couple in that space that I do want to talk about today, but I want to talk about the light ones, like us not having balls, us not holding certain standards, us letting standards slip, like those types of things that we can, prevent by elevating our CEO standards. And then the things we just can't prevent, which is shit just happens and it's literally something we have to just navigate on our own. So let's kind of talk about those two different things, because it happens for every business owner. It is not going to be fully eliminated no matter how good you are, no matter how well you price yourself, no matter how amazing you are to your clients. There's just going to be issues because it just is part of the game, right? Like you cannot please everyone. You cannot be perfect to everyone. Your standards, your clients' standards might not meet what is going on in your client's world. Personally, might impact the business side. There's always fucking something, right? So let's just go ahead just to tackle that topic. Let's talk about things that I've seen that are self-inflicted, not because you're not smart in the way you make decisions or not because you are a piece of fucking shit, but actually just because you're learning and growing as a business owner. And that is usually standards with your clients and basically trying to over deliver at the expense of your like own mental capacity and security and breathing room, and just like you being a human being and not being in a position where you have to do everything just because a client expects that, right? Now, when it comes to like CEO standards, this usually comes in like the marketing and sales process of like how you are going to basically present yourself as a potential option to your clients. Now, this can come from the way that you explain your offers. This can come from your price points. This can come from the language you use, right? We get to a point where we're calling in people who then we have to let them decide that they want to work with us, right? Now, here's the thing that I typically see is this comes in the forefront. The other one comes more on the back end. In the forefront, it usually comes from us feeling uncomfortable with prices and like charging our prices. It comes from wanting to say yes to everything, because if we say something isn't included, it means they're going to go elsewhere. It comes from us just holding our own when we're in the evaluation process. And a lot of the times when we're meeting with potential clients or we're having conversations, sometimes we feel like they are not in a good spot and therefore we have to meet them in order to bring them to our side. It's like, I'll meet you where you're at to bring you over. Well, what happens is if you meet them where you're at, they're never going to come to where you originally were, which means you're going to feel that gap the entire fucking time. You're going to undercharge yourself. And then when they're asking questions of you, you are going to, freak out, and you're going to want to, be like, oh my gosh, I should have charged more, or, this wasn't worth it. You're going to be messaging me in Slack as your business coach being like, I'm so freaking frustrated. She expects so much of me and she didn't charge a little, right? But you set that tone in the sales conversation. You were like, oh yeah, we can do it for this price point. I can do the same fucking thing in my 4K package as my 3K package, and it's fine. We set this tone of, because the client doesn't see the value, let us make them see the value, versus how can we assume that maybe that person just isn't a good fit and move on to someone that is. And we think so much about once we get this potential client in the door, we have to make it work. And although I am a salesperson and I'm usually you can make it work, there's also people who are just not a good fit, and you have to be okay with letting those people go. You just have to. You have to let the people who are going to like overthink pricing or ask for 8,000 payments or something else. You have to be okay with letting that go. And I want to give you guys an example. One of my first clients ever, this was 2 years ago for Buy the Blazer when we first started. We're going into our third year now. She messaged me, and I remember she was one of like my first like 6K, I think, clients. And I remember the day she signed. I actually just went to a restaurant this weekend, which is the restaurant I was at when she signed. Like I remember sitting with my friends and it was like, came in, right? And about halfway through her contract, she started getting really, really overwhelmed with the amount of money that she was in. Now, this isn't more on the back end process. She was already a client. But when she signed, she asked about payment plans. And I had already given her like an extended payment plan. I think she was on like a 10-month, I believe. Or maybe she was on like a 12-month. It was not good. Okay, I made a mistake. Fine. Anyway, she was on a very extended payment plan. So I already set the tone for, oh yeah, you can like pay me in whatever way works. Like I'm very budget conscious. And I still use that language, but it's very different than I used to. And even just the way I present price is very different. But I basically was like, yeah, we can like make whatever your budget works. And she's like, well, I'm really nervous about money, so I probably can't do more than this amount. Now, I want to be very clear that when someone says I probably can't do more than this amount, investments are meant to stretch you. So just because $400 or $500 a month feels comfortable doesn't mean that that's the price point in which you should agree to, okay? Guess what? Every time I've paid for like business mentorship or something else, I was more comfortable at like $1,000 a month, and usually it was like $3K a month, okay? It stretched me. That's what the investment's meant to do. It's meant to challenge you. You will see results in conjunction with the way that an investment stretches you and challenges you. So if you are wanting to see results, you shouldn't be investing something that's within budget, usually. Now, sometimes you just get to the point in business where you're like understanding really what things cost. But a lot of times in business, there are things that are going to be like, this is uncomfortable, but it's going to stretch me. And that's the point. Any client I've ever had an issue with usually are clients that paid under what they thought would be good for them. And I let them do a payment plan that was like, I can afford this versus what stretched them. Those clients are usually the ones that struggle. I'm just going to be very transparent. Not always, but usually. So this was the case, right? So she already tells me like, I think I can afford to do this. I make it work because I do care about my clients' financial situations. And about halfway through the container, she's not showing up to anything. She's not doing anything. And she, got to this point where she's like, I can't even afford the amount that I'm paying you. And of course, I'm like, well, I want to keep payments coming in. I want to keep momentum going, like, whatever. And we ended up adjusting the payment plan. You guys, I adjusted this payment plan no less than like 6 more times, like truly 6 more times. And I remember even the last month when the client was, finalizing stuff, she wasn't on auto pay and we can manually charge our clients. I ended up manually charging her account, and she's like, that wasn't actually my card. And I was like, well, it's overdue. So like, you can pay that person back. And like, it was a whole thing. It didn't make me feel good. I didn't like it. And every time I had an issue, I kept going back to the sales conversation where I'm like, I set the tone that was acceptable. And you'd think that the story would end there. Well, no, she comes back, re-signed into a container. I've actually had this happen in 2 different capacities, and same thing. I was like, well, it's a reoccurring client. It's going to be fine. And issue. And it's one of those things that when I look at the process, it's always me saying, well, I want to sign the client. So what do I need to do to make the client work? Versus how do I invite the client in a way that makes them want to make it work? And if I can't do that effectively, that's a sales skill. You guys should be investing in that knowledge. If you can't do that, we have to let those people go. So that's on the front end, right, of like, I could have probably changed that process. Then there's the back end of client deliverables. And I find this a lot when a client is asking for something outside of their scope, or if we're just going over and over and over again through the same stuff to try to like meet the client where we're at versus going in depth about what the problem is. And I want to explain what I mean there. Sometimes what happens is a client, let's say, is in a group program, and let's say they're struggling. Now, if someone's struggling in my program and they're showing up and doing the work, I will hop on a call any fucking day. I'm just going to be very clear about that. If a client was crying, freaking out, on, the edge of a cliff being like, I just don't know how to do this anymore, I'm going to be on a call within 30 minutes. It's just who I am as a person. I have no issue doing that. But again, that client's showing up, doing the work, asking the questions, being involved, doing what they need to do, right? Then there's people who don't show up, aren't involved with things and only message you once crisis alerts, right? Now, I'm talking more from a coaching perspective, but this could be the same with like a done for you, right? After 3 months of doing stuff, they're like, we haven't seen the results. Like, oh my God, I'm freaking out, right? And we reactively approach supporting that client. We basically hop on calls, we add stuff into their contract, we say, well, I can do it for you, whatever it is. And we basically react to the client's frustration and try to solve it by overdoing it and over delivering versus holding our own and saying, hey, this is not part of our current agreement. It's expected that we don't see results yet. Or, hey, you haven't been showing up to calls. Or, well, the last 3 times I've asked you to submit that project review, you never did. And actually pushing back on the client being a partner in the process versus us being the problem solver. And we always default to being the problem solver because we believe that that's our job. And I do think that that is within like a certain scope, that's part of it. But we can't literally do anything and everything for the client if they're not willing to do anything for themselves. So sometimes it's like something there. Sometimes it's also like when a client is just asking for like the freaking moon, asking for 8,000 revisions. Again, what we do is we try to solve each problem on its own, right? A client submits a project review, we tackle their sales process, we do it. A week later, they submit another project review, we tackle their sales, over and over and over, and they're not seeing different results. If we are constantly supporting a client through the same thing over and over, we're repeating ourselves, we're doing the same thing over and over again, we're doing the 8,000th revision of this piece of content, whatever it is, right? I need you guys to take a step back. You guys are keep pushing forward with the client. Take a step back and evaluate, like, what's the main issue happening? Okay, so every single sales call you've submitted to me, you've had the same 3 mistakes. What are you going to do in this next sales process to fix that? If you don't do that on the next sales process, you can't submit it. It's the same thing we've already said. Go make the adjustment. Let me know if you made the adjustment, and if you don't, then we're going to go through the process again. You're going to go through that sales process. You're going to make the adjustment. Then I'm going to evaluate how that adjustment was put into play. And I know it's like such a simple thing, but so often, like when I'm talking to clients and I realize I've like been repeating myself over and over again, half of it's, am I actually coaching them in a new way and helping them like reframe the question or the issue and look at it differently? But also some of it's the client's just giving us and hoping that then we fix it, versus teaching them how to evaluate the problem and then fixing it on its own, right? And again, I had another client, kind of like an issue back last year, where every single time the client was having an issue, immediately it was like 911, I need to be on a call. And back in my business, I don't know if I've ever shared this, but about 1.5 years ago, so that was not that long ago, both my masterminds, one was like 4 to 6K, the other one I think was 8 to 10K. Both my masterminds had unlimited one-on-one calls. Now, I want to be very clear. Half the people didn't use them. It kind of worked out. I wanted clients to be leaders and tell me when they want to call. But the problem is people use the call as the reason to get support versus the call is a different type of support for different types of needs. And what ended up happening is I had a client who would basically ghost me all month, get on a call, complain, she'd feel so much better, then do nothing all month, and then basically book a call as a reactive way to fix whatever she was thinking and feeling and struggling through. And what happened is halfway through our time together, she ended up losing 10 clients. I had no idea. We scaled her business. She went from 1 or 2 clients. She went to, I think, 11 or 12 clients in a matter of 4 months. So, like, I mean, massive growth, right? Like, that's huge. Clients were happy. I helped her learn how to close them. Everything was good. Well, we hopped on a call, super happy, right? And basically what happened about 3 weeks later is she started having issues and she was so overwhelmed with how to handle them, didn't ask me for help, even though she had Slack, everything else, because she's like, well, I don't have a call. So like, what am I supposed to do? And didn't use any resource, just let all the clients basically stop paying her, finished out her work with them. And we hop on a call and I'm like, how are things going? I haven't heard from you. I asked you this, this, and this. Like, how is this? Turns out now she's making no money in her business, can't pay me. And of course, from there, it became reactive. I went into like, let's meet. Then it became, you're only meeting with me so that I get you paying again and you're helping, whatever. It just became a mess. And I want to be very transparent with some of these things that have happened because they happen literally to every single person in the business. Mind you, this client was 2 conversations that month away from signing for private, what at the time was like a 20K package. She was the happiest client in the world. She had written 3 testimonials for me. And a month later, she's like, I want to sue you because you're the worst coach in the world. And that was a mess. And it was just crazy, right? And those are things that when I look back, it's the standards that I set. It's the conversations that I had in the sales process. And once the person was a client, the tone that I set that caused those issues, right? So those are like things that I look back and I'm like, I probably played a hand in. And then there's other things that I think just happen. I've had like, weird issues where, clients, again, very, very happy. And then they end up like blocking me on social media and, canceling their, payment plan. I have to manually charge them, which is always really awkward because, client contracts like don't go away and that's part of the process. And if you don't communicate with me, like that's what's going to happen. We're in the process of sending, a client to collections. Like there's just so many weird things that I've had to deal with. And some of them make no sense. There's some things I look back in the business and I'm like, I don't know how I could have changed that. I had a conversation with a client I thought went really, really well. We agreed on, a change that we needed to make. And she hated that conversation with me and said that that conversation was, really discouraging and that she didn't like how I handled it. Like there's always going to be things that happen in the business. Most of these happened, thank goodness, like last year. I think this year, last like 6 months have been really positive. We haven't really had a lot of issues. But when I evaluate my business, some of the things I can look back and say, this happened because of the standards I set. This happened because of the way I navigated sales and marketing and how I basically handed myself as I can do whatever you need type of person. Some of it happened in the delivery. And then there's others that I genuinely can't I cannot tell you why they happened. They just fucking happened. Now here we are in 2025. We have over a 90% retention rate, which is genuinely unheard of. About half of my clients in my 2 main programs have re-signed a contract in their first 2 months together, which is insane. That's basically a 12-month commitment with me. And there's a lot of things that are like genuinely going extremely well. But if I had to predict what's going to happen this year, will we have to send a client or 2 to collections? Probably. Will we have to have a really tough conversation with a client about payments or, not being able to adjust a payment plan because like it doesn't make sense or we already, made a couple concessions? Probably. Are we going to have a client or 2 who doesn't like how I handled things? Absolutely. And I think that that's just like a normal part of the process. The thing that I will say is something that has been extremely helpful to me is just having someone in my corner to process through these things. I've worked with, business coaches and consultants, and I think specialists are extremely helpful to kind of help you tackle those things. You can hire someone to, like specifically for conflict resolution. Business coaches that are really good and intentional can always help you kind of process those things. And there's been times where I've had to like 911 people that I love, meaning like just like hey, I really want you to help me with this like as soon as possible, and talk through these things. And I've, told clients like, hey, it didn't work out and that's okay. I've had other clients where I've had to push back on them and I've said, you have to follow through with these payments. Like we did nothing wrong. Like you owe it in your contract and you have to figure it out. And all these conversations are really, really hard. But I think the thing that it boils down to is like you as a business owner set the tone and the pace for your clients. You as a business owner can command respect while also being collaborative and kind and understanding. You as a business owner can do everything right and still in someone else's eyes do something wrong. And none of that makes you bad or good. It doesn't make you successful or failing. It doesn't mean that if you have a full client roster that you're not going to have issues on the back end. It also means that sometimes you can have no client issues and also no sales and be like, what the fuck is happening? Clients fucking love me. Why am I not making sales? Like all those things can happen in different combinations simultaneously. And I think that's what's really hard about business is we as business owners, I think in a perfect world, we want sales to be easy. We want people to desire to work with us. We want people to pay our prices and we want people to stay, right? Like I always call those like the 3 pillars of momentum, like attracting clients, converting clients, and retaining clients. Which is why we just launched a new program called the Headquarters, like why that program's blowing up, because it just focuses on those 3 things. I think we want that. And the thing is in that process, you're going to fall short in setting your standards sometimes in the attraction process, which is going to make people feel like you will do whatever you want for them, right? Like the way you talk about things. So I've seen a lot of posts recently about like, look how much stuff I do for all my clients. This is why my mastermind is the best. And I'm like, oh my fucking God, like no one cares. Converting clients, we're going to set expectations in the conversion process about what onboarding looks like, how much time they get with us, what our office hours really are, how often calls are, how often they can book with it. Like, we're going to set the standard and the tone for that. And are we going to slip in that occasionally because we want to sign a client, or we're like, oh, it's not a big deal, or like, well, they won't book all the calls and whatever. Yes. Are we also in the retention process going to fumble? We're going to have a client who literally tells us we're the greatest person ever, who doesn't want to re-sign with us. And we're also going to have someone who literally doesn't come to a single call for 6 months. This has happened to me on so many occasions. I never talk to the client. I'll DM them. I'll message them. I'll ask them to join a call. Yeah, I'm loving everything, blah, blah. Asked to re-sign. Never talks to them. It literally can happen in so many different ways. It's happened to me in so many different ways. It does just happen. And I want to remind you guys that regardless of how amazing you are, how smart you are, how strong you are, how confident you are, like, it doesn't eliminate your ability to get kicked in the nuts. It doesn't eliminate your ability to fall flat on your face. It doesn't eliminate the fact that you're going to be talking with someone who you fucking love, like a client you love, and they're going to tell you that you disappointed them or that you fell short. Like, it's just as part of the process. And I think that's a conversation people don't like to have because it makes them feel like they're doing something wrong if they're getting pushback or feedback or things aren't perfect, or, they don't meet with their clients enough, or whatever those things are. But it's also just like, what will happen? It will happen to every single one of you guys, and I wish it didn't. And there's things you can do to prevent the majority of it, but the minority is still going to exist. And so the reason I wanted to talk about this today is I've had a lot of clients who are, entering into the new year. People are exhausted. People are trying to find their energy again. People are coming back from holidays, and their clients are like, yeah, I spent all my money during Christmas. I can't pay you. Not to me necessarily, but to other people. Some of my clients are experiencing that. I have clients who are having difficult conversations, resetting boundaries. I have clients who have a bigger dick in 2025 than they did in 2024, and they're trying to reassess the way that they're marketing and calling in a higher ticket client and all these pieces. And I just thought it was really important to bring to light kind of what the reality is of scaling, that these problems exist at every level. I've learned from many of them. I've prevented many of them, but they still exist. I've made fuck ups when it comes to pricing. I've given away, a $6,000 program. I've given away, 50, 60 hours to one client before. I've done unlimited one-on-one calls with clients before, even though they didn't deserve it or never came to anything. I've added stuff to the calendar. I've done project reviews that take 6 hours before. I could literally go through it all. And I'm going to make more mistakes this year, but I'm also, I think, so aware of what it looks like to run a successful business that I look at those things as learning opportunities, and I look at those things as just inevitable aspects that will just continue to help me elevate my CEO standards and be a better leader for my clients, for myself, and then for future clients as well. So I think this conversation is really important to have. I would love to know your guys' feedback. Also, if you're surprised by anything I shared, that's great. I hope that you are. I try to be very diligent by obviously maintaining client confidentiality, but also being very transparent with you guys. And some of the elements of some of these stories are not fully specific to certain timelines, just to keep confidentiality kind of at the top of what we do. But I also think it's a disservice to not be transparent about what it looks like to run a business that can be as good as you want it to be, can be as amazing and profitable as you want it to be, but also has days where I'm like, this fucking sucks. And it happens to literally the best of us. So I hope this is helpful. Send me a DM if you guys have questions on anything I talked about. And I hope that you guys kind of take some of this maybe away with you and remind yourself that no matter what you're doing, if everything feels perfect right now, or if literally you feel like your business is on the floor and it's being trampled on by people, that you can change that. You have literally complete power for a majority of the things that happen in your business, and the ones that you can't, process it, learn from it, and keep moving forward.